What is going on, guys? Coding Clapper here. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can solve UASCO 2022 January problem 3 called Drought. Now, this program that I made using Python consisted of 95 lines of code, and please feel free to skip through the video because it's going to take a long time to solve the question. Anyways, do let me know if there are test cases that do not satisfy this question, but I was able to try the test cases given in the question, and they all seem to work. So yeah, without further ado, let's start. Alright, so I'm basically going to create 3 different functions. I'm going to call a function Drought. I'm also going to create another function called Special Cases. And then I'm also going to create another function called Triplet Comparison. Now, this Drought function is basically a gimmick, and you just call it, and it calls the Special Cases function. And the Special Cases function calls Triplet Comparison. Now, what Special Cases does is for cases that return -1, which means impossible, or return 0, which means there's nothing to do, this is what the function is for. And then triplet comparison is looking at 3 indexes in the list and basically comparing the values and just accordingly decreasing each of the indexes. Alright, so let's start coding. So, of course, Drought, I'm going to return the special cases function. I'm going to first make sure I print this function. I'm going to leave a list for now. And I'm also going to create a parameter here. So basically, again, this function is for checking whether the list is impossible to decrease and get to the same hunger level, or able to do something else. So I'm going to create a few variables, positive equals 0, 0 equals 0, and same equals 0. And now I'm going to start working on the impossible cases. So the case in the question, there's one case in the question that stated that there were 2 different values, 1 and 2, and assumably because one is different from the other, it's very much impossible to get to a same hunger level. So I'm going to create this. I'm going to say if length of h is equal to 2 and h at 0, is not equal to h of 1, then I'm going to return -1. This is our first case. Now let's start adding more cases. So this next impossible case basically is able to detect whether there is one positive value in all zeros. So if you look at case number, I think it's 3, you have 0, 1, 0. Both of these are 0, and this number 1 is there. Now what's happening here is that you cannot decrease because these are 0, so you cannot decrease. So I basically have these variables positive and 0 and same to check for that. So let's write a loop that says for I in range, length of h, if h of I is equal to 0, basically a sign, 0 plus equals 1, else positive plus equals 1. Now, in the end, we have to check that 0 is not 0, and positive is equal to 1. Now what I'm going to do is return false, or -1, to indicate that's impossible. Now a few more cases like this, where length of h is equal to 3, and h of 0 is greater than h of 1, and h of 1 is equal to h of 2. Basically here, what this is trying to do is basically an example case like this would be when ten, 9, 9. If you look at the question, that is a case, and this basically satisfies that by returning -1. The reason this can't be there is because this 10 is greater than this, and if I try to change this, those would be 8, 9, 8, 9, and if I try decreasing even more, it would never match, which is why it would be -1. Now let's create another case for the other side of the triplets. So if length of h is 3 and h of 1 is, h of 2 is greater than h of 1 and h of 0 is equal to h of 1. Then what I'm going to do is return -1. And then we're going to do the cases that are already finished. So I'm going to go here. And here I'm going to say if length of h is equal to 2 and h of 0 is equal to h of 1, return 0, because obviously both of these values are equal. And this is where the same variable come in. When I'm trying to check, I basically say for I in range, length of h, if same is equal to 0, same equals to h of I. And the only problem with this is that there could be a value that is 0. So what I'm going to do here is actually do infinite. Actually, I don't think that's a value, so let's just do something 10 to the 15th power, let's just say. Most likely you're not going to put a list with that, but same becomes h of I. Or sorry, if same is 10 to the 5th power, same is equal to h of I. Elif same is not equal to 0. If same isn't h of I, and then we're going to break. So what this means is that it's just going to go through the loop, and whenever it sees a value that's not equal to it, it just breaks. So this function just basically, or this loop checks that all the values are equal or not. And then at the end here, I'm going to say if I equals length of h minus 1, return 0. Okay, so now it's going to return 0. The only reason I did this is because if I do at the end, we have to run the special cases. So this is why I did that. Now I'm going to run triple comparison, and now we can start coding on that. We'll also input h, just like we did. Up here, this basically is going to be comparing 3 indexes of the list and looping at the same time. So let's put h here, again, like the other two functions. And then I'm going to have an index tracker I. Then I'm going to have a variable that helps decrease the indexes. And then I'm going to have a result at the end, which will be returned. Now let's actually start on the comparisons. So I'm going to create a while loop while I plus 2. Now I plus 2 is the third index, I plus 1, and I plus 2. So I'm basically going to say that's less than equal to length of h list minus 1, because that's technically the end where we should end. Because once we're done comparing with this, we're always comparing with I plus 2 and I plus 1. So once we're done with that, you don't need more comparing, because then it becomes two values and then there's no need. So now I'm going to type up the equal cases with a greater, and then after that a less, greater than, and less than combination. Okay, so let's work on our example cases. So if we took something like, let's say 5, 5, 4, we need to decrease these two. So basically we're going to create a loop that checks the h listed I and I plus 1 are equal, but I plus 1 is less than I. If we say h list at I is equal to h list I plus 1, and h list is greater than, sorry, and h list at, I think it's I, is greater than h list at I plus 2. Now I'm going to start using this decrease variable. So I'm going to say decrease equals to h list at I minus h list at I plus 2. And what this does is I here is 5, h list at I plus 2 is 4. So we're going to find the difference, and then we're going to decrease both of these variables. So the difference is 1, so we're going to decrease both of these, and this would end up to 4, 4, 4. That's the whole point of this decrease variable. And then after that, we have to multiply the decrease by 2 and add that to result. So then if we said h list at I minus equals decrease, and then for this one, and then we'd say h list, it's I plus 1, minus equals decrease, then we would need to add to result. So we'd say result plus equals decrease times 2. And we don't always have to set this back, the decrease back to 0, because every case we are changing it anyways, so it does not matter. Now let's work on example cases for if the opposite. So if we did something like 4, 5, 5, you would know it's 4, 4, 4. So now let's do this quickly. So elif h list at I plus 1 is equal to h list of I plus 2, and h list of I plus 1 is greater than h list of I. And then we're going to do decrease equals h list of I plus 1. We should have done I plus 1 to make this like the middle point. So I plus 1 minus h list of I. And then we would say h list of I plus 1 minus equals decrease, and then h list of I plus 2 minus equals decrease. And then we would say result plus equals decrease times 2. Okay, so that's for that. And then we're going to do example test cases for a different scenario. So if we did something like 5, 7, 5, and then we wanted to change that, it would become 5, 5, 3, or you could do the other way around, 3, 5, 5. Well, let's stick with 5, 5, 3, and then this would eventually become 3, 3, 3. This is because find the difference between 7 and 5. Then we subtract them from both of these. This would become 5 and 3. And then we change this to 3, 3, 3. So now let's do for that. So let's do elif h of list of I equals h list of I plus 2, and h list of I, oops, h list of I plus 1 is greater than h list of I and h list plus I plus 2 minus h list of I plus 1 minus h list of I is greater than -1. So now basically this is stating 5 is equal to 5, and 7 is greater than 5, and 5 minus 7 minus 5, which would be 2. So 5 minus 2 is greater than -1. Then we would return result. Sorry, we wouldn't return result. This would be at the end. Instead, we would do decrease equals h list of I plus 1 minus h list of I, and then we do h list of I plus 1 minus equals decrease, and then h list of I plus 2 minus equals decrease, and then result plus equals decrease times 2. And then after that, we have to make the changes after that from 553 to 333. So we would say decrease equals h list of I minus h list of I plus 2. And then we would say h list of I minus equals decrease. And then after that, we'd say h list of I plus 1 minus equals decrease. And then at the end, result plus equals decrease times 2. And now that is for that. Let's create another one for when the middle is greater than left. Well, let's say that I plus 1 is greater than I and I plus 2. So let's do example test cases. So let's say 8, 10, 5, which is the first one. Then we would bring this to 8, 8, 3. And then this would end up being 3, 3, 3. So here we're going to say elif h list of I plus 1 is greater than h list of I, and h list of I plus 1 is greater than h list of I plus 2. And then we're going to say if h list of I is greater than h list of I plus 2. For the case when 8 is greater than 5, then we're going to say decrease equals h list of I plus 1 minus h list at I. And then after this, we're going to say if h list at I plus 2 minus decrease is greater than or equal to 0. Then we're going to say h list of I plus 1 minus equals decrease. And then h list of I plus 2 is minus by decrease. And then, of course, like all the other ones, we're going to say result plus equals decrease times 2. And then we're going to say decrease because we ended up in this case after doing all of this. So we're going to say decrease equals h list of I plus 1 minus h list of I plus 2. And then we're going to say h list at I minus equals decrease. And then we're going to say h list at I plus 1 minus decrease. Lastly, result plus equals decrease times 2. Now we have to create a case for elif. So if this was the other way around, so elif h list at I plus 2 is greater than h list at I, and then decrease equals to h list at I plus 1 minus h list at I plus 2 if h list at I minus decrease is greater than or equal to 0. Down here we're going to say h list at I plus 1 minus equals decrease. And then we're going to say h list at I minus decrease. And then after that we're going to say result plus equals decrease times 2. But we're not done yet, so we have to do decrease plus equals h list of I plus 1 minus h list of I, and then h list of I plus 1 minus equals decrease, and then lastly h list of I plus 2 minus equals decrease. And then we have to also increase by 1 for I. So I plus equals 1. Now let's test this. So right here we have 1, 2, this is negative 1. Let's try every test case. So if I took this, we have 8, 10, and 5. So we're going to try 8, 10, and 5. Right here it says h list is not defined. Okay, so yeah, I named this wrong. Okay, that should do it. Okay, so we have 14 here. That is the first one. Let's try 4, 6, 4, 4, 6, 4, 4, 6, 4, 4, 6, 4. Okay. Now let's try. We have 16 here, as shown in the question. Now let's try something like 0, 1, 0. We have negative 1. Let's try 1, 2, which is in the special cases. Negative 1. And lastly, something like 10, 9, 9. And this also gives negative 1. So that is it, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching. Check out my other videos. up in the top right. I hope you were able to find the solution you needed, and yeah, catch you guys later. Bye.